Morning, everybody. This is Matthew James from Energy Post, and welcome to our digital roundtable this morning on district heating. The European Commission is counting on district heating to make gains in efficiency and also in decarbonisation, crucially, to help reach its carbon neutrality targets by 2050. District heating means different things to different member states. Of course, in the cooler states, it tends to be more popular. In Sweden, the systems are already very advanced. In other countries, they're in transition and perhaps in need of a complete overhaul. So different district heating means very different things to different people in across the European Union. If Europe is to make a success of district heating, then it's a question of coordination between the various directives, the Efficiency Directive, the Renewable Energy Directive, and also the Buildings Directive across those different states and where the conditions are very, very differently. I'm delighted to host this discussion this morning, but I'm just a co-host today, Energy Post. We also are being hosted by three MEPs who I'll introduce to you shortly, but just wanted to explain one thing about the process today. In a moment, you're going to hear from all of our speakers. After that, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions live. If you wish to ask a question, then please put your question into the Q&A tab. There is a Q&A tab that you'll find somewhere on your control panel. If you put your question in there, then the other people watching will be able to vote on the questions, and what happens is that naturally we will see the questions that most people want to answered float to the top, and that helps me as the moderator to come to the right question. If you want your question to be answered by a specific panelist, then please do let me know. Otherwise, panelists, if you want to raise your hand and let me know that there's a question that you want to answer. And panelists, if you could refrain from answering the questions in writing in real time, that would be great, because otherwise they go into a different basket and I'll miss them. Yes, that's the housekeeping for today. We're going to start in a second. I'd just like to introduce our first speaker this morning, which is MEP Gregor Tobiszowski. MEP Tobiszowski represents Poland, and his party is ECR. Over to you. And sorry, just before you begin, Mr. Tobiszowski will be speaking in Polish. If those of you who want to, who need it translated, including me, you'll need to click on the globe button at the bottom of the panel or wherever it is on your particular controls, the interpretation icon, and select the English channel if you want to hear it translated. And Mr. Tobiszowski, I'm going to hand over to you now. If you could just speak in a nice even pace, that would be great to help the interpretation, make sure everybody understands clearly. MEP Gregor Tobiszowski, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Dzień dobry, panie doktorze.
Hello. Hello, everybody. First, I'd like to very warmly thank you for giving me the pleasure, together with Ms. Weiss, Mr. Patterson, and the experts, to take part in a discussion about what in the European Parliament is one of the more important legal acts. I'm thinking about the Fit for 55 document, but also we'll focus more in detail today about the heating system. So I thank you for the initiative to ask us, the MEPs, so that together with the experts we can have our say, representing various communities and countries, about what it's like in Europe. So now I'm going over to those few initial thoughts, reflecting on the work that we are participating together with Ms. Weiss and Mr. Patterson concerning RED III directive. So you should note that the heating system in Europe, in the European Union, is not a comparable, uniform solution. You can see there are countries that have certain specifics. They have certain conditions which are not the same as in other countries. What countries am I thinking about? Well, first of all, I'm thinking about Germany, Poland, because the German system, like the Polish one, is 6 million households using district heating. And that district heating will be quite an important thing in our work over the heating and cooling system transformation under Fit for 55. But we can also talk about the Czech Republic and other countries of the region that have this network developed much more than the Western European countries. The district heating provides heat to about 60 million Europeans. And that's a significant number of inhabitants of our continent. So the Fit for 55 package in many areas proposes far-reaching changes concerning heating, in particular the district heating, that seem to require rethinking in depth. For example, a challenge impossible to meet in the biggest heating systems will be to achieve in such a short time, as proposed by the European Commission, the high share of RES. It's not because of a dispute concerning objectives. It's a question of reality of achieving those objectives. An example here can be the Warsaw heating system with its contracted capacity of 5.6 gigawatts, where a 50% share of RES will require installing around 2.3 gigawatts of new capacities powered with sustainable biomass, or we'll have to completely reconstruct the system. Currently, there's a widespread discussion going on about the problem of high energy prices, including the energy carriers of heat for the Europeans, which may lead to a deepening of energy poverty. Unfortunately, many additional risks also arise from the Fit for 55 package, which is an important legislation package, for example, concerning the implementation of the new EU ETS for buildings. The draft of Energy Efficiency Directive fundamentally modifies the definition of an efficient heating and cooling system by eliminating the high-efficiency cogeneration from the criteria as of 2035. Additional challenges come from the draft amendments to the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. A special attention should be paid, I think, in our work and adoption of legal acts should be the pace of changes that are possible to implement using technologies that can be used today in the heating system, often dictated by the heat parameters of the heat, and they're quite important here. In Poland, the energy mix is still dominated by the coal system in over 70%. Efforts are being made to replace the inefficient coal-fired heat-generating plants with high-efficiency gas-fired CHPs. The magnitude of the challenges faced by the heating system transformation is so big and huge that all the technologies that could be used for replacing the most emitting fuels should be admitted, should come into play. Our role is to develop such a regulatory framework and legislative framework that will foster the transformation to take place instead of perpetuating the use of the currently used low-efficiency solutions, for example, the individual sources of heating. This is why in Poland we are noting that the high-efficiency gas-fired cogeneration should be one of the possible heat sources for the efficient heating systems, also after 2035. And the emission criteria should be enacted as of 2030. Individual coal heating stoves, I'd like to point your attention to that, have hugely detrimental impact on the environment. It has to be noted that over 83% of emissions of PM 2.5 emissions come from domestic stoves. Therefore, connecting new consumers to the heating system reduces the adverse environmental impact. This is why it's so important that the new regulations should not aggravate the situation of the existing systems that have a status of efficient. Otherwise, the only alternative is air pollution and smog, created mainly by individual heating stoves. Therefore, district heating and cooling networks can have a great potential to accelerate the transformation that we are so much after, including by releasing the potential of waste heat that I'd also like to point your attention to very much, but also by developing heat storage technologies. Here too, we should be open to all solutions that will improve the current situation, which has to be changed definitely. Wherever possible, emission-free renewable sources should be used, but note that they are not always able to provide heat with the required parameters. The reason for the poor air quality in cities is, well, to a large part, is transport and individual heating, not their combined heat and power plants. Heat markets, therefore, are local. It's not possible to import surplus heat from distant locations. Therefore, e-regulations should therefore allow local communities to choose from a wide range of available technologies, from gas cogeneration to renewable solar panels, heat pumps, and electricity in general, depending on local conditions, which are, after all, extremely diverse in different parts of Europe. And closing, I think we are also here to listen to that voice of technology suppliers and district heat suppliers who are telling us and accentuating what ways can we achieve common goals, not only for those selected few, but also through a broad, huge transformation by implementing the most advanced technologies. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, MEP Tobiszowski. I could now introduce MEP Pernilla Weiss. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matthew, and thank you so much, dear colleagues, Morten and Tobiszowski. It's a pleasure to be invited in this panel this morning, and focus of what is one of the proud technologies and concepts also in my country, in Denmark, namely district heating. I'm the member of ITRA committee and also ENVI committee, but in ITRA I'm appointed as a shadow rapporteur for the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive. So it's very, very welcomed and timely that we have this panel today, because I then can hear from good colleagues and especially important stakeholders, and we will do so in a very short time, with a changing energy landscape when it comes to technologies and regulations. It is more than ever important to discuss the role of the existing but also the future technologies, and to what extent that we as European politicians shall maybe cherry pick and define what is and what is not the right solutions to live up to the European Green Deal targets. So I very much look forward to discuss this today, especially the role of the district heating and cooling in the future energy system. Now, first of all, I do believe that district heating indeed has to play an even stronger role in the solutions of the challenges that we clearly see are in the energy sector in Europe. There are no doubt that we have to be even more smart when it comes to planning the energy system. New restrictions on energy consumptions of new buildings, energy reduction requirements on existing buildings, changing conditions for individual heat pumps, etc., is needing. It is indeed changing the landscape, and it is only natural that we discuss the role of district heating and cooling in that respect. An issue is also related to co-generation of electricity and heat that has to be efficient and be done in a flexible, systematic way when it comes to the fueling of the power to plants. And there is opportunities, I would say, to adopt to the new technology. So also, therefore, it's important that the input that we get now for the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive tells us what kind of flexibility and innovation framework can we do to make also the EED top modern to work when it really hits the realities in the member states. The current energy reality, namely, demands a more intelligent energy system with district heating as an important part, as I see it. But in order to improve the energy efficiency and the transition of renewables, we also need a higher degree of transparency, which requires more complex and also more digital district heating sector. So I hope also that we can talk a little bit on that, how we can digitalize the energy sector in the context of district heating. It's more than ever important that we make use of waste heat through the district heating. It has become very obvious, but also it's a kind of what is being one of the good examples that are being discussed at the moment in the media. How can the ICT sector, how can the data centers and the heat that they produce, how can they benefit in the green transition and be a part of a future more energy efficient union? I really look forward to see how that can be done in a very efficient way, but also in a way that opens up for the innovative and technology neutral solutions to that, you could say, energy system molecule. So I will fly in for an end and handle over the floor to my colleague Morten. But I would like to say that with the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive that we now have in front of us, I really hope that we can reach a good compromise in the Parliament. And I know that Sobieschowski and me as shadows on that file really will try to push in the right direction, but also in a way that embraces technology neutrality. We need to create a stable legal framework that allows for flexibility for the member states in order to let district heating and cooling find its right place for the energy that works in every member state, but also in a way where the member states can co-create and learn from each other how it is best done. That would really be important, and I hope that we can have a great success in that. Because while everything else in the European Green Deal is about inventing new instruments through new directives, then the Energy Efficiency Directive is a mature, known principle and tool that can work from day one. Also in terms of the respect to the fact that energy efficiency is the most cost efficient tool to decarbonize our society. And we need to do so, because what the energy we don't use, we don't is the way to cut down CO2 emissions, or to move the renewable, the green and clean energy available to sectors who need them more than those who can actually use the energy in a more efficient manner. I look very much forward to hear both what Morten is saying and the debate that will come after the input coming from PGE. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Pernilla. And yes, indeed, Morten, if you could explain your reason for being involved today, and your views on what needs to be done on district heating.
Thank you so much, and thanks for inviting me. And let me first of all thank Mr. Tobiszowski sincerely for this great initiative, and compliment him on his leadership on these important issues. I think it's extremely important to have discussions like the ones that we'll be having today, trying to understand each other in a better way, and trying to emphasize further the important role of district heating in order to live up and rise to the challenges ahead of us. And I believe overall speaking that we all agree on the urgent need to meet our climate goals of achieving climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest. And in order to do so, obviously, we need to significantly reduce our heating demand and replace fossil fuels with renewables and waste heat sources. And in this, district heating systems obviously are extremely important in terms of decarbonizing our heating sector, as they allow for the integration of flexible and clean energy sources into the energy mix, including waste heat and renewables. And I think this entire topic of sector integration and combining the various sectors is extremely important to focus on. It's difficult to do in real life, but this is absolutely key if we are to integrate renewables further into our energy mix and also in our heating sector. So in my country, Denmark, district heating is the leading solution in our heating markets. I think the share is beyond 60%. It's 64% in the residential sector, and it keeps growing. And in being committed to being climate neutral by 2050, we have legally binding targets in my home country by reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 70% already in 2030. And these targets have been set across sectors, including a 90% share of renewable energy sources in district heating by 2030, thereby leading to a phasing out of natural gas. And in order to do so, we would have to pick up speed massively in integration of, say, offshore renewable energy, onshore renewable energy, and other sources of renewables. And the current renewable energy source share in district heating in Denmark is 60%, while waste heat recovery is only 3% of the supply. Biomass remaining the main renewable energy source in this, and expected to grow, not least also via heat pumps and electric boilers. And this situation obviously is very different across member states, which we have to factor in and take into account when legislating. Now, an efficient integration of renewables and waste energy sources into district heating, that would require, among others, national policies setting a supportive framework for obtaining and succeeding in having efficient systems. You would have various support schemes, direct, indirect financial support schemes, all driving investments in the right directions. You would need local governance and commitment of a multitude of stakeholders, making this more difficult to do than just being said. You need energy planning, being part of urban planning. You would need energy infrastructure in buildings, sharing best practices and lessons learned from all over Europe in order to facilitate this further. And then you need, which is difficult also, increased public awareness on this issue, allowing and incentivizing also to support end users to make the right choices in this. And I can say in my country, we have a national benchmark that allows all consumers to compare their tariffs in district heating and other utility services to services in other cities, and thereby incentivizing a performance improvement. Now, this entire energy transition cannot take place without this heating transition. And this is where district heating obviously has an extremely important role. And I have to say, and this is a constant puzzle, I hope we can get back to this in the discussion, that district heating as a topic is extremely under prioritized, given the importance that heating and district heating has in the overall energy transition. So I think we have a mutual obligation and task here in order to increase awareness on this important topic. And finally, and let me wrap it up here in this first round. Now we have all the pieces of legislation on the table in European Parliament. So the next 2 years, 2.5 years, are going to be extremely busy and extremely interesting. As mentioned by my good colleagues, Tobiszowski and Pernille, we have the Energy Efficiency Directive being negotiated soon. We have the Renewables Directive being negotiated soon, whereby we have to see to it that we can integrate renewables further cross-sector and increase sector integration on this. We will soon be negotiating the Buildings Directive. So all this to say that we have to ensure and make sure that the district heating issues are centrally located in all these files, all the legislative files that we'll be negotiating very soon. So it'll be an extremely interesting phase. And I think we as MEPs all rely heavily upon having good advice and good points and suggestions from stakeholders in industry. So I'm looking very much forward to the discussion we'll be having today. Thank you again, not least to you, Mr. Tobiszowski, for leading this discussion and these issues. I'm looking very much forward to the discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to all three of the MEPs for setting this discussion up so eloquently. Some very complex issues, very different situations in different member states. And first of all, the next stages first of this roundtable is to hear from stakeholders across Europe. And we're going to begin with PGE. We have the CEO of PGE CE who's Mr. Przemysław Kołodziejczak, and he has some slides which I'm just about to load up. Can we hear you, Mr. Kołodziejczak?
Dzień dobry Państwu.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me to this debate. I'd like to present to you what the Fit for 55 package looks like from the point of view of a heating utility which provides and supplies heat. The PGE Group is Poland's top producer of electricity and heat produced in high-efficiency cogeneration. We have around 25% share in the cogenerated heat market in Poland. We are operating 16 CHPs with a total thermal capacity of nearly 7,000 megawatts. We also have heating networks several hundred kilometers long, over 700. We are providing district heating, as we estimate, to over 2 million customers in Poland. Already today, at present, over 20% of that heat is produced in gas cogeneration that we have built with a huge financial effort. Of course, we're not stopping at that. We're planning that by 2030, that's what our strategy assumes, we'll build 1,000 megawatts, electrical megawatts, of new build cogeneration capacities. Therefore, we'll have sufficient heat capacity as well. That 1,000 megawatts, we want to build them in low and zero carbon technologies so that the share of heat produced in low and zero emissions would be 70% of all the heat we are producing. That will require huge capital expenditures. We are estimating that to be nearly 3 billion euros to achieve that program. The PGE Capital Group, in its strategy, assumes that in 2050 we will achieve complete climate neutrality. This is also for us as a heating sector an objective and target. This, of course, already today, besides producing that heat in cogeneration, we're also producing and supplying heat coming from renewable sources. We're producing biomass heat We have the biggest 120 megawatts unit in Szczecin, a smaller one in Kielce. We're using electrode boilers, which is power to heat technology. If we'll have energy available from offshore wind farms, we'll be able to expand that technology. We're building huge-scale heat pumps, also working or using as their supply the waste heat, among others, hot water from waste treatment plants. We're also working on other forms of using waste heat, the one that is not being used at the moment. In our system, we have large-scale heat accumulators. We're building new ones. We're also producing cold from heat, providing it to our customers, like in Zielona Góra town. We have several such facilities. Besides, we are conducting educational efforts intended to teach energy saving, because the best, most green or ecological energy or heat is the one that has been saved, because it entails no emissions and is cheapest, in fact. Therefore, the proposals indicated in the Fit for 55 package, we treat them or welcome them as a huge opportunity for revamping our sector. However, we also see a big challenge there, because whether the opportunity will convert into a success fully will depend on in what way the legal provisions of that package will be implemented. I'd like to show you what does it look like from the point of view of our company. That ambitious program of building 1,000 megawatts and moving to zero and low carbon fuels, we are doing it already. On this slide, which you can see now, we're showing the 270 grams per kilowatt hour threshold. We'll achieve it. It is possible, it's achievable, but only in most of our units in 2029. Our first sources will reach that level in 2 years, but the others will be coming in later. Why? Because of one thing, the investment process, the construction process for new sources, from the moment you begin the design work, environmental agreements, up to commissioning, that's 7 to 8 years, and we're not able to speed it up, this transformation. It's like telling a sprinter, they've got 2 seconds for running 100 meters. They just won't go to the start line because they know it's impossible. Of course, concerning the current technologies, because we're also producing heat from chemical waste treatment, but due to the specifics of the Polish heating systems, because they are located in the biggest cities with quite intensive or dense housing, introducing the rest solutions there, individual solutions, is problematic. So the first step, what we're preferring, is gas-fired cogeneration, because we have known technologies, we have experience there. However, then in step 2, we'll be using the heating networks, which we consider a huge capital. We can also use them to deliver heat coming from renewable sources, like we're doing it, for example, in the town of Szczecin. In case of big heating systems, besides those technical barriers resulting from the location of gas, there's also the problem of obtaining waste heat. Typically, big industrial plants that have such heat are located away from such cities, and there are technical problems to transfer that heat. We're working on such solutions. One of such cases is a subject of our intense work.
Propozycja standardu emisyjnego 270 gramów na kilowatogodzinę.
The proposal of the 270 gram emission standard, as I have said, it is achievable, but to achieve it, Polish companies have to be given time. If there won't be a time given, we're afraid of achieving an opposite result, because losing the status of energy efficient heating system will result in, first of all, there will be a limited access to financing allowing for the transformation of such a system. This will also cause problems with connecting new customers to the system. You'll also have disconnections of existing customers, and the result will be such that the system will be sort of fixed in its carbon monoculture that it's currently in. So, as a result, we will get higher CO2 emissions, higher dust and air pollutants, mentioned by MEP Tobiszewski earlier. So we'll have a resulting effect opposite to what we intended to get. However, if these conditions resulting from the package in the final version will be enshrined in a realistic way that they can be actually achieved, then we will achieve the objectives that that package defines. So we will achieve the transformation of our systems towards low carbon and zero carbon in future. Also, what's very important is what has been said here is the issue of integration and appropriate interconnection of the requirements resulting straight from the package and also resulting from the directives concerning renewable energy, energy efficiency of buildings, for example. And closing, I'll put it this way. The 270 limit is achievable. However, whether it will be achieved, that depends on how much time will be given for that. And that I have shown the matters of investment are such that you cannot do it overnight. It will take time. It's not 1 year. It's not whether we want to or we don't. We do want. We want to change our heating sector, our power sector. The question is whether this will be possible at all, so that in future, for our next generations, we can provide them with better air and with a greener planet Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwodziak. And we will now, I would like to hand over to Birger Lausen, who is currently acting Managing Director of Euroheat and Power. Birger, could I bring you in now? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Matthew. Good morning, everybody. I am, as Matthew said, Birger Lausen. I am currently the president of Euroheat and Power and also the managing director of Euroheat and Power, which is the international network promoting sustainable heating and cooling in Europe and beyond. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to participate here, and thank you to our MEPs for hosting this event. We're certainly glad that heating and cooling, and in particular district heating and cooling, is on the agenda, not only here, but increasingly also generally. We are very pleased that the EU has recognized the importance of both heating and cooling and our sector, and since 2016 has begun gradually developing a policy on it. The Fit for 55 package incorporates this policy, and it does grant us some of the wishes we have had and promoted during the development of the package. I can give you some examples of this. The EU Commission is clearly recognizing and promoting district heating and cooling as an important part of not only the transition of the heating and cooling sector, but also as part of a deeper integration of our energy sectors. The Commission proposes a definition of efficient district heating that describes a path of gradual transition of district heating and cooling towards carbon neutrality in 2050. And that is good because the threat could have been a threshold that would cut off part of our sector. We appreciate the positive changes and additions aimed at strengthening the National Heating and Cooling Comprehensive Assessment Instrument, specifically the point on encouraging regional and local authorities to prepare heating and cooling plans in municipalities with a population higher than 50,000 inhabitants. We believe relevant stakeholders, such as utility providers, should be given the opportunity to participate in preparation of the comprehensive assessment and the heating and cooling plans, and the policies and measures to implement them. The proposals also provides a framework for integration of waste heat. There's clearly a need for the proposed planning and coordination, as well as stronger instruments to ensure the potential for waste heat is actually utilized. The proposal on Energy Performance of Buildings Directive goes part of the way towards equal treatment of on-site and nearby renewable energy heat in buildings with regard to the fulfillment of directive targets. And the package also proposes to ensure internalization of carbon costs in the heating and cooling sector through the building and transport ETS. A level playing field has long been desired by our sector. But the package also presents our sector with some challenges. District heating and cooling is promoted, as I said, but this support is not unconditional. There should be progress towards carbon-free district heating and cooling. The sector has pledged to decarbonize our networks in 2050, and it is fair to insist on this transformation, just as we insist on targets for our sector being fair and achievable. It has to be recognized that member states and their district heating and cooling sectors have very different points of departure for their transition. Taking into account the many differences between member states in achieving the objectives of the energy transition, we believe more steps are needed in the staged approach applied to the definition of efficient district heating and cooling to make sure this is achievable and just for all member states. The transition will take time, it will require patience, and it will require the accept of transitory solutions. The Commission proposes to enshrine the energy efficiency principle in law. We do appreciate that, but the principle should also be respected in the treatment of waste heat. Use of renewable heat should not be prioritized over the use of unavoidable waste heat. The Commission also proposes higher targets for both energy efficiency and the use of renewable energy. We accept these higher targets for energy efficiency and renewable energy, provided they are fair and obligations cover the whole heating and cooling market, and provided that the need for supporting meeting them is recognized and met. The proposed energy taxation on biomass used in district heating and cooling is unacceptable, as it damages the competitiveness of district heating and cooling via the individual heating solution. It does not tax individual use of same fuels, and it risks distorting competition with electricity because electricity from biomass would be taxed lower than heat from biomass. We need better coordination. We need, you could say, a clear division of labor between directives. There are many overlapping instruments and targets in these directive proposals. But all in all, we find that there are many good elements in the Fit for 55 package, fulfilling many of our wishes and providing us with opportunity to transform and grow our industry. We are and will remain a key component of the energy transformation of our cities and our energy sectors. But we also appreciate today this opportunity to make everybody aware of the challenges in the package and to discuss possible remedies to correct them. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to attend here, and that was the end of my intervention here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Birger. Thank you for that. And next we have from Cogen Europe Managing Director Hans Korteweg. Welcome this morning, Hans. And you have some slides. Are you able to share?
That's correct.
Superb.
I am sharing them now already. Well, let me begin by thanking everyone for the opportunity to be speaking with all of you today. Let me begin with the first slide. So Cogen Europe is the association promoting cogeneration. We're a cross-sectoral organization, voice of the cogeneration industry. In today's energy mix, cogeneration delivers around 12% of electricity and about 16.5% of EU's heat today. Deploying CHP today translates into significant energy savings and emissions reductions. This is achieved by displacing more polluting and less efficient generation. Further emission cuts are increasingly achieved by ensuring an efficient switch to lower carbon energy sources like natural gas, as well as renewable energy. On the point of renewable energy, over the past 10 years alone, renewable energy in CHP has tripled from 9% to 30%. And we see the uptake of renewable fuels in CHP continuing to increase. By 2030, there is a cost-effective potential for cogeneration to deliver 20% of the EU's electricity and 25% of heat, using a wide range of increasingly renewable and low carbon energy sources. Realizing this potential could further reduce energy consumption by 870 terawatt hours, and additionally reducing CO2 emissions by 350 million tons by 2030. Taking a longer term perspective, the cogeneration sector is committed to creation of a resilient, decentralized, carbon neutral energy system by 2050, where we see cogeneration as its backbone, empowering European energy citizens, industry to generate their own efficient, reliable, and affordable clean heat and power locally. Our recent 2050 study, based on a robust integrated energy system modeling, shows that an additional 40% gigawatt of CHP is optimal to deliver less costly net zero emission system, ensuring affordable energy to consumers. And this contributes to energy efficiency of the system and significant cost reductions up to almost 8 billion euros a year. The importance of CHP and district heating and cooling. District heating is a key application for cogeneration today and will remain in the future. CHP and district heating and cooling can be considered complementary to pushes towards electrification and further renewable uptake, not in competition. Today, CHP delivers 70% of district heating and cooling in Europe. While there will be district heating systems that can fully rely on heat pumps, renewable electricity, and waste heat, most cities are opting for a diversified mix, which includes CHP. Such examples include large cities like Vienna, Munich, Bucharest, Berlin, and key cities in Poland. And we have many examples of cities like Hosford, which are switching to green hydrogen to avoid curtailing wind and power, which is synergistically used in CHP to complement the increasing uptake of heat pumps in the system, reducing the cost of grids and securing supply of energy when and where needed. By 2050, if we look at our own studies, as well as the district heating and cooling sector's roadmaps, CHP will remain a key contributor in the district heating and cooling mix, covering at least 30–40% of the total heat and up to 90% for non-electrified portion of heat. We have modeled use cases of net zero district heating and cooling systems to take into account different national contexts. Adding CHP to district heating and cooling will deliver cost savings up to 3 million per year for 500 megawatts. Therefore, CHP will be critical for energy affordability in the next decades. Coming specifically to the Fit for 55, there are many facets, many recasted directives and new directives that have an implication, an impact on CHP and in particular district heating and cooling. Fit for 55 will certainly be critical for the EU's decarbonization on the path to zero emissions by 2050 at the lowest cost to consumers. Let's not forget that. Cogen Europe is therefore committed to working with policymakers, including members of the European Parliament, to deliver an ambitious and cost-effective Fit for 55 framework. In the Fit for 55, the benefits of CHP are not fully acknowledged. I think that's been pointed out by several of the speakers before me, especially when it comes to district heating. Fit for 55 sets more ambitious goals for CHP and district heating and cooling, which we can acknowledge and accept, but without considering coherence with the uptake of renewable energy sources. In red, understanding the operator's challenges to switch to lower carbon energy sources. The overall energy system integration will be increasingly difficult to stabilize. The affordability of energy for consumers. Excuse me, the light has gone off in my room. That's energy savings for you. So in terms of our key recommendations, efficient district and cooling definition should prioritize CHP for the efficient use of thermal energy sources, both natural gas and thermal renewables until 2035 and beyond. As for CHP and the district heating cooling definition, a coherent and comprehensive framework must be considered. This is important. We need to set a realistic time frame for each milestone. We need to allocate sufficient funding for lower carbon CHP and renewable investments. And finally, we need to account for system level benefits rather continuing in a sector by sector approach. Thank you for your attention, and looking forward to the other interventions and the discussion following.
Thanks very much, Hans. And I will now like to introduce Andrea Voigt. Andrea Voigt is Head of Public Affairs at Danfoss, based in Brussels.
Thank you very much, Matthew, and thank you very much for inviting us to this event, which is very timely, of course, and very constructive also in the debate on Fit for 55 and on the Energy Efficiency Directive more specifically. Danfoss is a global manufacturing company headquartered in Denmark with a significant footprint in Europe, and is basically an energy efficiency technology provider which touches upon every aspect of our daily lives. Danfoss is a strong supporter of the EU's Fit for 55 package, which we really need to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So with a more specific focus now on the energy efficiency aspect and on district energy, I would very much like to highlight 3 points. First of all, the importance of active energy efficiency, which means that energy flows should be managed and controlled actively so that the energy use can be adapted to the actual needs, and so that we can cater for the increasing amount of fluctuating renewable energies. I would also like to very much highlight the importance of waste heat recovery. A lot has been said already beforehand, but I think there is even more that can be done in this respect. And I would also like to highlight the importance of heat pumps in that respect. So first of all, coming back to the renewables, we need more and more renewables in order to achieve climate neutrality. And according to a scenario of the IEA 2050 of the IEA's 2050 Global Net Zero Carbon Roadmap, we need at least 60% of renewable energies in the power generation and 12% of the total final energy consumption by 2030 already, renewables. And those renewables are fluctuating. So therefore, flexibility and storage are really extremely important, and this needs to be achieved in a cost-effective way. And that's where the active energy efficiency comes into play. More specifically, heating and cooling comes into play because heating and cooling represents half of the total final energy consumption in Europe. So clearly, if we want to achieve carbon neutrality, then we need to address heating and cooling, which is on top of that mainly based on fossil fuels still. The district energy is a very important part of the puzzle in this respect because it provides this much needed flexibility and thermal storage solutions as we move towards the renewable energies. It provides the capability to actively manage those energy sources. The magic word, which was also mentioned by the speakers beforehand, is sector coupling or system integration. And here the district energy is really a major part of the puzzle, as I was saying. I would like to give an example to illustrate that a little bit more in detail. And MEP Pernille Weiss also referred to this example already in her intervention, which is data centers. It's a very good example to show how district energy can basically help to make use of the synergies between heating and cooling, and by doing so, to decrease the needs for heat. So how does that work? A data center needs to be cooled. The servers in a data center need to be cooled. For that cooling, you can actually use a heat pump. Heat pumps do not necessarily only heat. Heat pumps can also cool. So if we have a heat pump to cool the servers in a data center, then we could use that heat pump at the same time to pump up, in inverted commas, the heat that is generated by the cooling installations of a data center. And that heat can then be fed into a district energy network, which is nearby. And by doing so, we can basically decrease the need to generate heat. And that, at the end of the day, of course, helps to phase in the renewables, and it also helps to move away from the fossil fuels and to ensure that that we achieve our targets. The same principle is true for supermarkets, for example, as well. It's true, generally speaking, when you have waste heat and when you can feed that waste heat into district energy networks. And that brings me to the point I wanted to make about the heat pumps. Generally speaking, when people refer to heat pumps, they think about residential small heat pumps. That's what comes to mind often in the first place. But a heat pump is not only a small residential model. A heat pump can also be a very big industrial model. And it's those heat pumps that can make a very big contribution in connection with district heating and cooling, because they are very energy efficient, they offer high energy storage management, and they can be tuned to work when the electricity is available. So therefore, they can also make the load on the grid much more manageable. And that's what you see illustrated here a little bit on the slide that you see on the screen. It's really the future of the cities, and the energy transition can be built on those three pillars, and the heat pumps are a very crucial piece of those three pillars. Then bringing in the digital aspect, which was also mentioned beforehand, it can even be further increased and even be made further energy efficient if we have digital solutions in terms of monitoring and controlling available, like, for example, thermostats, like, for example, sensors, like, for example, software that allows to adapt to the weather, to the temperatures, etc. So again, active energy efficiency to make sure that we use as little energy as necessary, and that we can phase in the renewables again. So in terms of our policy asks from a Danfoss perspective, we think that what is really important is a very strong overarching signal of energy efficiency as a target, as a binding target at European level, and also with binding national contributions, at least 40%, if I speak in the previous metrics. Then a strong focus on active energy efficiency, and here, for example, building automation and controls can play a very important role, but also all the solutions I mentioned beforehand. We need, as an instrument, heat maps. Heat maps are really, really important because they help to tap into this potential of using synergies between heating and cooling, for municipalities to plan also how they intend to generate the heat and how they intend to phase in the renewables. Ideally, such heat maps should be mandatory, and they should be for municipalities, of course, at least as of 50,000 people population. If this threshold can be brought down, it would even be better. Then a strong focus on waste heat recovery, and waste heat recovery here also from sources, as the example I was giving beforehand, also from sources like supermarkets or data centers or industrial processes where cooling is used, because cooling generates waste heat, and that waste heat can be pumped up with a heat pump and fed into the district energy grid. In terms of the data centers, we think that a mandatory sustainability scheme would be extremely helpful, because it would help to avoid fragmentation across the European Union, and it would help to really make this important sector sustainable. And finally, also provide a way to include waste heat recovery that may occur or that will occur if we talk about hydrogen and about power to X, because there again a lot of waste heat is generated. So strong focus on waste heat, big heat pumps, big industrial heat pumps that can be used, a strong overarching signal, and good planning that brings together all of the stakeholders would really be our wish list. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Andreas Graf is our next speaker, Associate Director for EU Climate Policy at Agora Energiewende. Andreas.
Yes, and I'm now sharing my slides. I hope you see them.
We do. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually a senior associate for EU energy policy at Agora Energiewende, but thank you for the promotion. I just thought I would start my contribution just showing some of the insights we gathered from a modeling study for climate neutrality. It's only one vision for how the sector in Germany can contribute to climate neutrality by 2045, but it does align with Germany's climate and energy goals and targets to achieve climate neutrality by 2045, and I think illustrates at least one path for the industry going forward. So on the left, you see the starting point, at least a couple of years ago, where the industry is really largely supplying energy with fossil-based energy, still with a significant share of coal in the system, much like the Polish energy system, but also a very significant contribution also from fossil-based cogeneration. What you see in the 2045 and 2050 perspective is that this energy supply will have to have completely shifted to non-fossil based energy sources with the direct renewables and waste heat share rising from roughly 1% today to making up around 2/3 of the energy supply. That's a massive transformation, and that will all have to take happen and be undergone in the context of growing market share and growth for the industry. Not the simplest of challenges. And this transition has multiple phases, as one sees from this graph. It's one where the focus is first and foremost on phasing out coal at the beginning of the period. Beginning in 2025, there's a significant ramp up in the industry, but also a beginning of this direct renewable and waste heat transition at scale. And from 2030 onwards, it's really about energy transition. And I thought I would just take a few more examples here to show you the scale and the pace of change. This would require, by 2045, a market share growth of 130%, direct connections being added at a pace of 220,000 units per year between now and 2030, and that rising to 340,000 units per year in the period afterwards. It would mean an almost complete phase out of fossil-based heat with only a small share of waste incineration, fossil-based waste incineration in 2045. It will require, despite growth, actually reducing primary energy losses in the system, so that systems efficiency perspective that we just heard about from Danfoss as well. And perhaps most challenging here on the right, this massive scale up of the direct renewable and waste heat supply, as well as a scale up of especially renewable hydrogen, at least in this vision, for matching that peak demand in winter to make sure security of supply can be guaranteed. And finally, what this also means is a very quick investment time frame. So this is just another figure from a modeling exercise from a few years ago, Heat Roadmap Europe 2050, and the authors and researchers in that study tried to estimate the distribution of district heating investments between now and 2050. And what one clearly sees here is that those investments cannot wait until well into the 2030s, but rather they peak in 2030. And so we'll need to have a framework that really allows for the Fit for 55 to deliver massive investments immediately after its adoption. That's the context in which we are discussing the Fit for 55 package. And so with that, when we look at the Fit for 55 package as a whole at the moment, we see a framework for guiding investment that is more or less fit for purpose. It tries to balance these competing objectives of massively scaling renewables and waste heat, and at the same time providing some flexibility to the industry to deliver on that investment. In the one or the other instance, we can of course discuss where those conditions could be tightened. Where we see the larger deficiencies, or the places where the framework could still be tightened, is around both the energy planning dimension, where we agree with Danfoss that the scope of municipal heat planning should be expanded, at least to this provision of no longer being applicable to municipalities over 50,000 inhabitants, but 20,000, but also to make it binding, to make it something that really is done and delivered on the ground across Europe, because of this investment picture we are seeing on the screen right now. But also to take into account several additional dimensions in that planning. So the critical role of thermal heat storage, but also the sustainability challenges we have with biomass. Biomass also in the vision we just presented plays a critical role. The absolute volume of bioenergy still is maintained until 2045, and yet we need to ensure that when expanding on this expansion of district heating, we do not lock in unsustainable levels of biomass consumption. And finally, with regards to the link to the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, we really need to make sure that in that legislation, we're making sure that the building stock is fit for purpose for this low temperature district heating vision, for the massive scaling of renewables and waste heat. And we believe that that legislation can also still be strengthened in this context. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And finally, Jonas Fridstedt Villadsen from Grundfos in Denmark, or Brussels. Perhaps you can tell us where you're based. Over to you, Jonas.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. As an introduction, Grundfos that I represent today is a company from Denmark, a little bit like Danfoss, and somebody might think that we have coordinated positions today, but we haven't, I would say. But we are a Danish solutions provider within climate and water solutions, originally coming from the pump industry. So we are a global company in 90 different countries with 27,000 employees all over the world. Going to the topic today, the Fit for 55 package is a golden opportunity to deliver on the three biggest challenges that the EU is facing: the decarbonization of our society, which is an obligatory task; the robust transition into a green heating system, so we can move away from the dependency on oil and gas. I think that's really something that is up in time right now. And then finally, also the mitigation of the rising energy poverty we see in many parts of Europe at the moment. We need to secure a just transition with stable and affordable energy prices. And this response we need right now. And district heating can address all these three challenges just right away. So that's really something that we should have in mind today. With the revision of the EED and the PPD and the RED, we have a great opportunity to take the district heating to the next level, delivering on the challenge that I was actually talking about before. We, as Grundfos, see a big potential in upgrading to what we would call fourth generation district heating. There's a sky-high potential here. With the fourth generation district heating, you basically lower the temperature in the network, so you'll be able to connect new energy sources to the grid. Sources like geothermal energy, waste heat, others touch upon that from industry, data centers, but also from supermarkets. I think it's interesting. And of course, also with the future power to X facilities that is creating a tremendous amounts of waste heat if we see into that future. Just to go to the Grundfos part of it, we have a solution called iGrid. iGrid is a new digital, what we will call 4G solution, where you actually are putting digital eyes on the grid, so you can deliver demand-driven district heating to the consumer at the needed temperature. With this, you will be able to lower the temperature significantly, because when you look traditionally on the district heating, you are transporting 80 to 90 degrees water in the network, and that's really not very efficient. So if you lower the temperature to around 40 to 60 degrees, you can actually reduce the heat loss from the pipes with up to 25%. This counts for more than 2 million tons of CO2 at EU level. So there's something significant here to actually tap into. And we just did our own calculations in Grundfos. If just half of all the EU district heating systems were using iGrid or similar solutions, because there's others on the market as well, we could actually power 800,000 households with affordable and green energy based on reduced heat loss. So that's really something I think is a good number to see into. And if we are adding all these new sources of waste heat that we are talking about here, we could cover up to 25% of the energy consumption in the EU. I think this is a number that stems from the same plan that the previous speaker was talking about. So it's of course a big number, and it needs to utilize all the sources, but it is a potential that is really something we should tap into. And I don't think we can miss out on that opportunity. And right now there is actually no legal incentives in the EU legislation to drive this change. So that's also why the Fit for 55 package, and especially the EED, is something that we really think could deliver on this. And going to just some policy asks on how we see the EED, then we think it should secure better national heat planning. Others touch upon that as well. It should ensure a zonal approach. So you put up heat pumps, typically where you see in dense areas, and zones for low temperature district heating in urban and suburban areas. The EED should set up mandatory requirements to utilize waste heat. And finally, the EED should also make it mandatory for large data centers to deliver their waste heat to district heating networks. Of course, it's not all parts of Europe that is actually having district heating, but at least where it is, it should be mandatory. That would be my recommendations for now, and I hope we have time to take some questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonas. Perhaps if I could come to Birger initially to talk about how he responds to what PGA is describing as a real obstacle for them.
Yes, I mean the problems that the PGE is looking at is certainly not unknown across Europe. It's sort of, I mean, it deals with this transition. I mean, this is not something. District heating is not a technology or a system, one system that we can change overnight. This will take, as I said, a long time and require patience and respect for the different positions that district heating is in different countries and localities. I'd like also to reflect on a bit. I mean, I could see in the chat there's a bit of discussion on waste heat, sort of that there's a risk by accepting waste heat we somehow legitimize make sort of the production of or the use of fossil-based waste heat sort of legitimate through district heating. But I think we have to be aware, and I'm glad you showed that graph, Andreas, with the investments needed for district heating. I mean, we need to make investments up front. How are we going to finance high investments in networks simultaneously with developing renewable energy sources? We need to help financing our grid investments through the use of the cheap waste heat, regardless of source. One of the explanations for the high level of district heating in Denmark is that we have used the availability of waste heat that had no alternative value to feed that what can have a value in the heat market if we have the infrastructure. So we use that cheap heat to invest in the infrastructure. So now we are in a position where we can say these investments have been made, they have been recovered. So now we can afford the investments in renewable energy. I think this is an important sort of transition that all district heating systems have to go through. I fail to see how district heating networks or cities can invest in both infrastructure and development of renewable energy, which is typically costly, at the same time. I know this can be, this is not in order to legitimize the use of fossil-based waste heat. It's simply a fact of life that otherwise we cannot, I don't think we can make this transition. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we are very, very close to running out of time. If you could tell us what your takeaways are from today, what you think, what your priorities are with regard to this sector.
So thanks for this, and thanks for extremely useful presentations. And I hope that we'll be able to obtain the slides after this event in order to get the specifics right. Now, I think the notion and idea of mainstreaming the energy efficiency first principle is to me one of the most important issues in this, because that is sort of the overarching principle that needs to guide us and in which we'll be able to make the right decisions down the road. So from a policy perspective, it is extremely important to get this overarching, say, vision or principle to get it applied in all the legislation that we have on the table right now, which is again coming back to the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Renewables Directive, the Buildings Directive, and all the other big files on the table. And then I took note of also what was mentioned by Danfoss on this heat mapping exercise, heat map issue, because to me it seems like an extremely interesting and right thing to do, given that by having this, at least we obtain some sort of knowledge of where we are, and then we can discuss measures on where we want to go. So I take this point with me and the work ahead, and again, so many useful points coming in. So it'd be great to have the slides after this discussion. Thank you, Matthew.
Yes, the slides and in fact summaries of the entire discussion will be published on Energy Post. Thank you very much, Morten. And if I could come now back to Mr. Tobiszowski.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today to Ms. Weiss, Mr. Patterson, all our experts. Today's discussion and exchange of opinions shows that the matter is complex, and the fact that we have decided during the legislation work to deepen that matter concerning the differences between individual countries, this is correct. I wanted to share a reflection that today, for me, is perhaps not the most important, but quite valuable, is that our discussion shows that we have different conditions of member states concerning the heating system, especially the heating network. We also have, and we are noting that we have a local and regional nature of the heating systems. That locality and regionality relates, among others, to the availability and type of fuel, and also the layout and density of heating networks, resulting in it being very difficult for us, or even impossible, to find solutions that will be universal for all the countries. Therefore, the work on a legal act, in my opinion, should be adapted to the specific conditions of member states, taking into the account the current characteristics of their heating systems and energy mixes, so that we could define the regulation that will make us effective and efficient in the environmental objectives and targets we are assuming.
MEP Tobiszowski, thank you so much. I will just try and get a few words from your colleagues, and then I know that I think you wanted to thank everybody. I will come back to you at the end for final goodbyes, and I would like to then come to MEP Weiss. Did you have a final words to add to your comment, your intervention just now?
I would like to underline also that I support the wish from Morten's side to get the presentations from all the speakers, but also that I very much find it interesting about these mapping because it echoes also what I hear from a lot of stakeholders in the municipalities across EU countries. And maybe that can be also bridging the ask from some stakeholders, and I acknowledge that a lot, that national binding targets would be preferable, but in a political, realistic world, we need also to bridge the suggestion coming from the Commission, the more realistic maybe, that we will have a binding EU target on the energy efficiency. So the instruments on how we make that to be a reliable agreement now to deliver in 2030, there maybe the maps can be something that can really make it work, and also in a way that we can channel the funds and the financial tools in also a cost-efficient way. So I very much would like to look into that, especially. So thank you so much for having me, and special thanks to my colleagues, and more than a special thanks to all the stakeholders, Biwa, Andrea, Jonas, Kolodiecka, Andreas, and Hans. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for a wonderful hosting, Matthew. You really did it good in this, not letting us lose a sight in the translation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And just from our stakeholders, briefly, Hans, do you have some final words?
Thank you. Well, I like what I heard, especially in terms of energy efficiency principle first. MEP Peterson and MEP Weiss stressed that we need to focus on energy efficiency first. But it shouldn't only just be a mouthpiece. It's very easy to say we should prioritize energy efficiency, but we need to now see that in the actual legislative proposals. We need to make the entire energy system more efficient and less polluting. And energy efficiency, applying that principle first, will take us a long way. And it's not just final energy savings, it's the total system efficiency, starting from the supply side of things, where we see CHP playing a key role in that respect. In terms of, our high-level recommendations, district heating must be promoted to support a cost-effective decarbonization of heat. We need to see district heating and cooling play an important role in all our communities. CHP should be prioritized, in our view, to ensure the efficient and resilient switch to low carbon and increasingly renewable district heating and cooling networks. And finally, CHP, therefore, must therefore be smartly integrated into efficient district and cooling definition and consistently prioritized across Fit for 5 and other relevant legislative proposals going through the decision-making process. Thank you, and thank you again to all the participants, and thank you for inviting us.
Thanks very much, Hans. And Andrea.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And again, thank you very much for inviting us. So from a Danfoss perspective, 3 points. 1, we have to tackle heating and cooling because it will solve half of the EU's energy challenge. 2, district energy is a triple winner because it accelerates the phase-in of renewables, it reduces the energy needs for heating, and it reduces cost. And 3, we need an ambitious Fit for 55 framework and an ambitious EED to make this happen. 1 with an ambitious and binding energy efficiency target of at least 40%. 2 with mandatory heat maps for municipalities above 20,000 people. 3 waste heat recovery also from cooling that can be combined with heat pumps. And 4 mandatory sustainability schemes for data centers. Thank you.
Very concise. Thank you very much, Andrea. And I would like to come now back to the CEO of PGE in Poland, Mr. Kołodziejczak. Some last words for us, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Decarbonization of heating is obvious to us, with no doubts whatsoever. We're going that way. However, as I have shown earlier, for this to be possible, certain conditions have to be met to make it possible, because we are moving from a different starting point than our colleagues in the other European countries. This transformation is to be of more evolutionary nature, which does not mean it should not take place, but I mean it should be more evolutionary, it should take into account the issues mentioned already of social acceptability. We as a heating industry are doing the things you were talking about. I mean, just not to be talking. Have a look. This is a heat map for the city of Krakow, where we have shown how the heat supply should be transformed or meeting the heating requirements of our cities' inhabitants. If these conditions for the Fit for 55 package implementation will be such as they will not allow us to do it, then unfortunately this map will be dustbined. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kojak. And I would like to come to Andreas from Agora Energiewende. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I believe also the last comments now show that we will not be able to avoid a conversation about countries having different starting points. I believe that the vision that I painted today for Germany is one that could also be applied essentially to countries in Central and Eastern Europe, and therefore can be achieved. And nonetheless, we should of course talk about the preconditions for that vision to actually be achieved, and maybe discuss then what that means in the context of the Fit for 55 package. What also legislation and national frameworks will have to deliver for this to be possible.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And Jonas, final words, please.
Thank you very much, and I will just make it very short. I will just support everything what Andrea just said from Danfoss. I think we have common positions on that, and then just add the value of heat planning. That's very, very important that we put that into the energy efficiency directive with some obligations for member states to do heat planning in order to lower the temperature and in order to uptake all these extra energy sources that we need for the future mix. And then just final off to say, imagine a future where you could actually letting your favorite Netflix serial heat your cellar. That's just a picture I've been thinking a little bit about. It's just fun, but of course I think it's an interesting thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, if I could hear from just final words from Birger Lausen on what you've heard today. Thank you.
Well, I've heard a lot today, and I agree with most of it, I would say. But, last words, I would rather put that in one sentence of sort of what we as a sector could wish for, which is a predictable and coordinated legislative framework that accommodates diversity while guiding the heating and cooling sector through a cost-effective transition towards carbon neutrality in 2050. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation today.
Thank you very much, Birger. Today's roundtable was it was an initiative of MEP Gregor Tobiszowski. I would like to finally come back once more to MEP Tobiszowski. Your thoughts on today's discussion, and perhaps just to summarize for us. Thank you very much.
Hello. Well, I thought that previously I did sum it up, but I'll say thank you once again. Thank you, the host, Ms. Weiss, Mr. Patterson, and all the experts. And I think that the discussion we started today should be continued, taking more detail of certain enshrinements that should take the diversity of systems into account, and also the time to achieve the targets, so that in our transformation we are effective, first of all, from the points of exit that we have, from the starting points. without setting the goals which are inachievable, that will not result in social acceptance, and at the same time, we would not be able to use the available technology so that in subsequent stages, time-wise, we can achieve the objectives that would satisfy us. In fact, I think that today's discussion has convinced us of that. That should be suggestions for all of us who are working on the appropriate provisions, legal provisions. Should be a discussion about the contents that should make their way to the table of the European Council, where decisions in that case will be made.
Thank you very much, MEP Tobiszowski, and thank you. I think that concludes the session for us today. I want to thank everybody for attending. We had very, very good attendance. Well over 200 people at one point online. There is obviously a lot more to discuss, and from an Energy Post point of view, I think it was really, really interesting for us to hear about the different stages the different member states are at, and trying to reconcile the differences across those stages, making sure that the countries that are starting from district heating systems which are in need of perhaps what you could describe as a complete overhaul are not left behind, especially taking into account the length of time it takes for financing to be in place and construction, that the amendments to the directives need to take place sooner rather than later if systems right across Europe are able to decarbonise, become more efficient in line with the objectives of the European Commission. I think that was something that came across loud and clear today. Certainly, I wanted to thank all of our speakers. I barely have time to thank you all. We've overrun so much, but special thanks, of course, to our MEPs who co-hosted today. MEP Gregor Tobiszowski from ECR from Poland, MEP Pernilla Weiss, EPP Germany, MEP Morten Helveg Petersen from Renew Denmark, but all our stakeholders too. From
Next time I will be there speaking in Danish, since I come from Denmark and not from Germany. Not that I don't like Germany, but
okay. Forgive me.
No.
Thanks for the correction. But yes, thank you to all our stakeholders, to Euroheat and Power, Birger Lausen, thanks very much. To Hans Korteweg, Cogen Europe Managing Director, Andrea Voigt from Danfoss Public Affairs, Andreas Graf, who is Senior Associate, I think that's the correct title, from Agora Energiewende in Germany, and last but not least, Jonas Fredsted Villadsen from Grundfos in Denmark. Thanks very much to all of you for your input, and thanks very much to our readers, and I look forward to welcoming you at our next event very soon. Thanks very much to everybody, and goodbye. Have a nice day.